Patch 14.3 has been another massive one, and it's led to a bunch of meta shifts. So in today's video, we're going to be providing you guys with a complete update on the solo queue tier list for every single role, thanks to the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data. Also, we're excited to announce we've done a massive update, adding all brand new courses for Season 14 on our website, skillcap.com. And if that's not enough, we upload 10 new Smurf commentaries every week where a challenger teaches you how to play every champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. The best part? You can try all this out completely risk-free. If you don't rank up while actively using SkillCap, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted in Season 14. The big meta-shifting change coming out of the top lane for this patch has been the buff to Illaoi. Illaoi's tentacle range being increased has heavily outweighed the damage nerf and has propelled her to the top of the solo queue tier list. The change just makes it so that Illaoi has way more consistent trading capabilities in lane, as prior to this buff and due to the Season 14 map changes, it was almost impossible to hit the enemy with tentacles attached to walls unless they were standing super close to them. Illaoi is a phenomenal pick for pretty much every single rank right now, but even better for the lower elos where players don't respect her skirmish strength as much. Illaoi is a great add to your champion pool for top lane in 14.3, as we'll be giving her a further bump up the tier list for mid patch, going from S into OP tier. One top lane champion who's really flying under the radar for this patch is Maokai. If you just took a quick glance at the Maokai changes, you'd probably think they were nerfs, but they're actually huge buffs for top lane Maokai. With the mana cost on Maokai Q being reduced and the cooldown on the spell being lowered, it helps a ton with his ability to farm and trade in lane. From 60 mana down to 40 is an absolutely monstrous buff for an ability that you can spam out off cooldown. Maokai Q is also a relatively easy spell to land, so the buffs just allow for way more consistent harass power during the laning phase. Top lane Maokai doesn't care at all about his saplings other than tossing them in a brush for vision, so the early game nerf to the spell doesn't matter at all. If you're someone who likes to jump on the new meta trends before everyone else, then look into playing Maokai top right now, as we expect him to become a lot more popular in the coming patches. For Maokai's tier list placement, he will be moved into the top lane S tier for 14.3. So if we have a look at how the top lane tier list is shaping out, there's now just one champion in the OP tier, with Illaoi locking down the spot. Illaoi is just straight up OP as a result of her buff this patch, and especially with Trundle being hit with the nerf, it's helped to separate her even more. Speaking of the Trundle nerf, it's affected him exactly how we anticipated, as he's no longer OP, but he's still a really strong top lane pick and remains in a very respectable S tier slot for now. We noted in the pre-patch tier list we were going to hold off on moving Yorick up the tier list just due to the changes being very unique and hard to judge exactly how much strength he'd gain from them. Now that the data has come through, the changes have proven to be extremely impactful. With Yorick's Q heal now scaling off his missing health, it's made building Bruiser a lot more effective again. In previous patches, the most optimal build was lethality by far, but now you can run Trinity with Sundered Sky and find great success. Yorick's really dominating in Emerald and below, but does fall off a bit in Diamond and above. If you were to run into a tier list made for Challenger Elo in 14.3, they probably wouldn't have Yorick very high up. Remember though, we craft our tier list based on the best champions for the majority of ranks, and in that case, Yorick is a really strong solo queue pick again. For the first time in a long time, the changes to Nidalee have actually led to her finding a lot more success in the lower ranks. It makes a lot of sense though, because Riot ended up buffing Nidalee's E, which is the part of her kit that takes very little skill to use. In a sense, the champion is just more stat check now, meaning that you can just win fights due to having better stats than your enemy. It can also be a lot more difficult to function with Nidalee the later games drag out, and with these buffs to Nidalee's E, it helps her remain more relevant even if she's not landing every single spear. On a side note, Nidalee's incredibly strong with the Lichbane rush right now as well, and players have finally started catching on to the build, which has definitely helped with her win rate increasing. So for Nidalee's tier list placement, she'll be moved out of the jungle B tier and into A for 14.3. If this were a tier list solely based on what's best for Challenger, you could argue for Nidalee to be in S or even OP, but our tier lists are skewed towards what's best for Diamond and below, and despite the buffs giving her a nice bump for the lower ranks, Nidalee is still one of the more difficult junglers to execute for the average player. Another notable adjustment we're making to the jungle tier list for this patch is moving Graves out of the S tier. Graves had been an S tier staple for many months, but he's finally dropping out due to indirect nerfs. Both Ghostblade and the Collector were hit this patch, and they're Graves' two core items, so his mid-game spike got nerfed a considerable amount. You can find Graves in the jungle A tier for 14.3. So for the complete jungle tier list, we have a few more minor adjustments to discuss for mid-patch. OP tier stays the same as where we had it for pre-patch, with Nocturne and Briar on top. The Lillian nerfs ended up being more significant than expected. She's lost about 4% from her overall win rate, so we're giving her an added push down into A tier. Brand, on the other hand, was not affected as heavily by his nerfs, and he remains in the S tier. With a lot of junglers moving down in priority for 14.3, it's indirectly given rise to champions like Kha'Zix, Bel'Veth, and Master Yi. Bell and Master Yi are both Kraken Slayer users, and the Kraken changes have turned out extremely positive, so they've been thriving. A really interesting build popping off on Yi for this patch has him completely bypassing Blade of the Ruined King and instead rushing Kraken, going Rageblade second and then Titanic Hydra third. With Rengar falling down quite hard due to his direct nerfs this patch, it opens up the playing field for Kha'Zix to rise back up as the best AD assassin jungler. Rengar did lose a good 3% off his overall win rate in 14.3, so he's really no longer worth a pick unless you're a very mastered Rengar player. Moving on to some of the major mid lane adjustments, Aurelion Sol is by far the biggest talking point of the patch. We noted in the pre-patch tier list that we'd hold off on moving Sol anywhere on the tier list until the mid-patch update, and with the changes being live for a few days, it's safe to say they've been highly impactful. So much so that Riot was even forced to issue some hotfix nerfs, so let's take a look at those. Q's Stardust stacks per champion has been lowered from 3 to 2. It turned out that increasing the stacks from 1 all the way up to 3 was way too broken, so Riot's meeting in the middle with this change. Still stronger than before, but just not as OP. W cooldown buff is being completely reverted as it's going back up from 15 to 22 seconds at rank 1. W bonus damage applied to Q was originally buffed for 14.3, but with the hotfix nerf, it's now actually weaker than where it was in 14.2. At the time of making this video, the hotfix nerfs have been live for about a day now, and they haven't seemed to move the needle all that much in reducing Aurelion Sol's power. As a result, we will be placing the champion in the mid lane OP tier as one of the highest priority picks of the patch. So looking at the mid lane tier list now, there were a lot of adjustments being made for mid patch due to many indirect changes. As mentioned, Aurelion Sol is moving up into the OP tier and will be joined by Twisted Fate. We had moved both Cassio and Anivia into the OP tier for pre-patch, but since the Aurelion Sol buffs have panned out as broken as they've been, we have to push Cass and Anivia back into S. This doesn't mean Cassio and Anivia are weaker though. They're way stronger this patch due to the Rod and Archangel's buffs. It's just that Aurelion Sol and TF are cut above all else. Other than Cassio and Anivia, Kassadin is another champ who shot up in power from 14.3 as every single one of his core items were changed. With the Lich Bane, Storm Surge, and Rocket Belt nerfs being issued for this patch, it has negatively affected a bunch of mid lane champions. Echo is one champ who's feeling the effects of the Lich Bane and Rocket Belt nerfs especially, and he's been moved into the A tier to reflect that. Nico is another mid laner really hurt badly by Rocket Belt and Storm Surge, so she sees a further push down the tier list. The Corki changes absolutely dumpstered his solo queue win rate, dropping down to around 45%, so the champ isn't really worth playing now. The bot lane meta has actually been pretty interesting over the past patch, as we've had Smolder's release combined with Twisted Fate becoming a top tier ADC. Twisted Fate was even indirectly buffed for 14.3 due to the Rageblade changes, so he's in an even better spot now. As ADC players become more accustomed to piloting TF and understanding his limits, the champion is looking extremely powerful in the role. There are actually 2 builds you can run on ADC Twisted Fate right now, as you have the energized build of Static Shiv and Stormrazor, which will work best into more squishy comps. If you're against a tankier composition, then running Kraken Slayer with Rageblade is going to be much more optimal. What's so great about being able to play TF in the ADC role is that he just offers so much more gank assist than any other ADC. With most other ADCs, you've got to rely on your support or jungler to land CC in order for a gank to work, but with Twisted Fate's gold card and with Flash available, he can set up plays extremely well. Just by locking in Twisted Fate, you pretty much force the enemy ADC into taking cleanse, which sucks for a lot of ADCs that would rather have Ghost for later game fights. Ezreal is now the highest played ADC in the game right now, and his win rate when he runs cleanse is 2% less than when he takes heal, but against TF, he just needs the cleanse. If you want to play a really nasty duo for 14.3, Twisted Fate with Maokai is disgusting, as the amount of point and click lockdown will have you scoring so many easy kills. For Twisted Fate's tier list placement, he will be moving from A into S tier. So it's now been over a week since Smolder's release, and the champion is looking extremely powerful. The scaling strength of Smolder is absolutely incredible, and even though his win rate may not suggest he's super strong right now, you have to take into account that so many players are still first timing the champion, so the win rate will give you a false representation of how strong he actually is. Since Smolder's release, his win rate has been going up by around 0.5 to 1% every single day, and if that trend continues, it won't be long until he's above 50%. At the time of making this video, Smolder's win rate is around 49%, which is insanely good for a new champion release. There's actually a really interesting hybrid build starting to pick up traction on Smolder, and it revolves around Spear of Shojin, Riftmaker, and Liandry's. Challenger ADC Saber made a post on Twitter highlighting this setup a few days ago, and since then, it's now become Smolder's highest win rate build for solo queue. Smolder actually has AP ratios on a bunch of his abilities, so that's a big reason to why this setup can work. Smolder does need to play relatively up close to be most effective, and this build does a really good job at enabling that with all the health. Does this mean the standard crit build with Essence Reaver is weak though? Not entirely, but this new hybrid setup definitely looks to be extremely powerful as well. We're going to keep Smolder in the ADC S tier, as we believe he is one of the best ADCs right now, as long as you have a decent amount of games on the pick. If you guys want to learn more about Smolder, our challenger player Hector has a new commentary for the champion on our website, and we upload 10 new commentaries every single week. Just a few minor adjustments to the overall solo queue tier list for mid-patch, as the meta has remained similar to where we had it for pre-patch. Misfortune and Vayne are locking down the OP tier slots, as Misfortune wasn't hit that bad by the lethality item nerfs, while Vayne saw a nice indirect boost with the Rage Blade buffs. The changes to Ezreal and Zeri have played out to expectations, as Ezreal remains in the ADC A tier, while Zeri's buffs have pushed her up to being a decent B tier pick. Ziggs is now back in a pretty good spot as a result of his buffs, so if you're looking to add an AP carry to your champion pool for those games where your whole team locks AD, he's a great option again. To be quite frank, the support changes did absolutely nothing in shifting the meta for the role in 14.3, so tier list is pretty much the exact same as it was in 14.2. We expected a little more out of the Maokai nerfs, but they've barely reduced his strength at all, so we're moving him back into OP tier for mid-patch. The Shaco changes kind of flew under the radar for support, as we were more focused on how they would influence jungle when we made the pre-patch tier list. W max first on support Shaco is actually winning at a very high clip in 14.3, as the mana cost on W was reduced from 70 down to 50 at max rank. As an ability you want to be spamming out of cooldown in the mid-game for zone control around objectives, this buff has been quite positive, and Shaco's getting a push into S tier for the mid-patch update. Pike buffs have been slightly more positive than expected, so he's the one other champion we're adjusting for mid-patch, going from A into S tier. If you truly want to improve and rank up fast, head on over to skillcap.com. We just finished a massive update adding all brand new courses for Season 14. We even upload 10 new Smurf commentaries each week, where a challenger teaches you how to play every champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. And remember, you can try all this out risk-free. If you don't rank up while actively using SkillCap, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted this season. So there you have it, guys, a complete look at the solo queue tier list for every single role as we reach the midway point of 14.3. Thanks so much for watching, good luck in solo queue, and we'll see you back soon.